Hey guys, thanks for checking out Quick Sessions Podcast. My name is Garrett Terrio, coming to you from Houston, Texas, inside Timberline Fitness Studio. And yesterday I was having a talk with a client. Client's looking to lose some weight, and he was going over kind of the game plan that he wanted to put together, something he thought would work for him. And in the conversation, I brought up, well, at the end of the day, it's all about calorie restriction. And, it doesn't matter what kind of diet you do, they all work, but it's all about calorie restriction. And he was not challenging me by any means on it, but he was saying, well, I think it's more about focusing on the right foods, because if I ate 1,500 calories a day of good food compared to 1,500 calories of Doritos, I'm pretty sure the good food would win out. And I said, well, of course, you're bringing up an extreme, right? But it got me thinking. I knew the basics, but it got me thinking of really, why does that matter? Why is a calorie not a calorie? What's a more in-depth reason? Like, we all know eating too much sugar will make you store fat. We all know the basic, but the idea of why that happens is something I had to dig a little deeper into, and I'm glad I did, because it is something you don't really hear about, right? We know not to eat the bad stuff. We know to eat the good stuff. For the podcast today, I'm trying to take out things that are just, considered a lack of discipline, right? Because a lot of these stuff is how much it satiates you. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but there are way more reasons I came across. We're talking about, well, you'll be hungry and yada yada. And while no one wants to feel hungry, it's a very unpleasant feeling. Part of losing weight, especially if you have a lot of weight to lose and you're putting a time limit on how much you need to lose, the act of being hungry is just normal. Sometimes you are going to be uncomfortable because you're going to crave something. Now, normally cravings go away the longer you're on a restrictive diet. For example, if you want to cut out sweets, if you're used to eating sweets every day or every other day, it's going to be hard the first 3 or 4 days. You're going to have to actively fight yourself and your cravings from the sugar. And the same thing with overeating. If you undereat for a couple days, you're going to have hunger pains. It's just part of it. And you just have to push through and deal with it until your new normal is, 1,500 calories, 1,800, whatever your daily calorie intake is planned to be. So what is it with calories? Is a calorie a calorie? Is it different? Well, kind of and not really at the same time. So one dietary calorie, no matter what it is, it contains the same amount of energy, 4,184 joules to be exact. I don't know if anybody remembers what a joule is, but if you took science in high school, you'll remember it. But that is the amount of energy in one dietary calorie. And so it sounds like they're the same, but where it changes is when you ingest it. Because different foods go through different biochemical pathways, best way to put it. And some are inefficient and some are efficient. Normally efficient is a good word, but as you'll see when I get to it, that's not necessarily the case in this particular example as far as food going in your body is concerned. But the first thing I want to talk about, because I talked about sweets, because I'm a big sweet tooth, and giving up sweets is my biggest thing. Whenever I'm getting a little too heavy, I cut out the sweets, and that's the first thing. That's step one. That's the first thing to drop some pounds. I wish there was something else I had to substitute this vice for, but with candy or anything sweet, cakes, brownies, anything like that, the problem is it's easy to get, it's calorie dense, and it makes you feel good, tastes good, all that. But if we're going to talk about sugar, we're going to break it down to the two different sugars. Probably heard of both of these. It's fructose and it's glucose. Now, gram for gram, they have the same number of calories, but they are very different when it comes to being absorbed by your body, being metabolized by your body. Glucose, that's the good guy. That can be metabolized by all of your body's tissue. That's why when you work out or do a big run or something, you'll have glucose tablets or things of that nature, drinks with glucose in it. Whereas fructose is primarily, it's metabolized by your liver. Now, what this means, you have a bunch of body tissue metabolizing this sugar, or you have one. Now, it's pretty common sense which one you would rather. If you're going into a fight against something, you want as many people as possible. You don't want to rely on just one thing, one person. And on top of that, because it's metabolized by more tissue in your body, it's going to make you feel fuller. So that's a bonus. And the side effects of glucose aren't nearly as severe as side effects of fructose, right? The fat stores, the blood sugar crashes, all that. And I know I brought up the satiation thing. Like I said, it's just a bonus. Nothing here that I'm going to talk about I want to bring up as being just something that satiates you. Because that's the part where if you're disciplined enough, it doesn't matter what satiates you or not. You're just not going to do it. And I'm not referring to actual blood sugar crashes. I'm talking about the feeling of fullness. Now, the one thing with fructose that it does get credit for is it is in a lot of fruit. Even though I just talked about how much better glucose is, the fructose in fruit is different because fruit is rich in fiber and has water, and you have to chew it a bunch. So that really mitigates the negative effects of the fructose. It'll perform, it's not going to be absorbed like glucose, but it'll have a much better performance in your body to where the fiber helps digest it quicker in and out, and it doesn't have the negative effects on, your hunger, your hormones, right? Everything's regulated through nutrition absorption, the metabolic health that fructose does not help, or it's less so than glucose. So that's it for that. That's the difference between fructose and glucose. I know I kind of went a little backwards on that one, but that's the point. So anything that has a lot of fructose in it, you want to avoid it. Besides fruit, anything higher in glucose, you are perfectly got the green light to eat it. Now here's the part I found real interesting. It's the part that in my discussion yesterday I was trying to articulate, but through reading I think I found a better way to say what I was trying to say. Now what I was trying to tell my man yesterday is that the metabolic effects of the different calories matters. But now after reading around, looking at some journals, they put some numbers to the reason certain things matter. And what that is the thermic effect of food. Now, remember when I was talking about efficient and less efficient being kind of the opposite as far as good and bad? Let's put it this way. So the pathways for fats, carbs, and proteins are very different because each of these macronutrients have a different thermic effect. Now, what the thermic effect means is that some of these calories from these macronutrients are lost when they're metabolized and digested and all that. So the numbers put to it, we'll start with fat. Fat, we all assume it's bad. That is about 2 to 3% of a efficient absorption. Meaning, if you take in 100 calories of fat, straight fat, 98 of it is going to get through and get absorbed. Compared to carbs, which is about 6 to 8%, still pretty low. Then you get to protein. Protein is 25 to 30%. Meaning if you get 100 grams of protein in, you can only actually expect to use 75 calories of that 100 calories of protein. And it's because it takes so much more energy to metabolize protein. It takes almost no energy to metabolize fat, so there is no thermic effect, really. Don't lose much of it through heat. Same thing with carbs, even though it's a little bit better. And protein obviously is the king, right? It makes your body work so much harder to digest protein. If you've gone out and you've eaten a big steak or gone to a Brazilian steakhouse or something like that, you know how you feel after. That's your body working overtime to digest all this protein. We've all heard of the meat sweats, right? You go to Thanksgiving, you take a nap after because you're exhausted because your body's working overtime trying to metabolize all the protein you just ate. With this thermic effect, your body naturally will raise its metabolism throughout the day because it has to work harder. So just in the same sense that when you go run, your metabolism rises for the rest of the day. Same deal with eating protein. Now, not to the extent that running does, but 100 calories a day maybe compared to a lower protein diet. To sum it all up, this whole thing, this thermic effect of food just shows you, yes, a high protein diet and low fat, low carb is going to give you a metabolic advantage compared to, a high carb, medium protein, low fat type of deal. And on top of that, protein is one of those things that is not as calorie dense. You're gonna feel fuller longer eating protein because of the work your body has to perform. And the best way to think about this, think about it in the summer when you're outside and you're working a lot, you don't really get hungry. Your hunger is kind of zapped when it comes to heat. And same deal, when your body's metabolizing all these proteins, it's not going to be hungry. It's too busy working. And so, you could think about it as one of these things. If, let's say you don't want to go on a big time diet, if you just increase your protein intake, you're automatically going to burn more calories. And maybe it doesn't sound like a lot, but let's say you have 1,000 calories of protein. Well, 25% of that's going to get burnt off anyway. So really you're only consuming 750 calories in theory. And on top of that, your metabolism is going to be raised, we'll say 100 calories a day, and we'll just knock it off that 1,000 calories. So now 1,000 calories is now 650 calories. So now if you're tracking it and you're keeping this deficit, well, you're 350 calories lower than that deficit already. So really just shifting your macronutrients to a higher protein diet can go a long way in giving you a bit of a cushion when you're really trying to count your calories or count your macros, however you want to count during your diet. Now, an obvious one I'll touch on real quick is the satiety index, how satiated you feel when you eat something. And that just goes to the obvious, right? You get 1,000 calories of ice cream, you can take that down no problem. If I said eat 1,000 calories of eggs and vegetables, wouldn't be so hard. You'd be sick of it halfway through. So that's kind of common sense. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. But things like boiled potatoes, beef, eggs, beans, fruits, those are the things that'll make you feel full. Now, the things that don't make you feel full are the obvious sugars, donuts, candies, cakes, anything you'd eat for dessert, any of that garbage is never going to make you feel full. That's why someone can eat, a whole cake or a whole pie. No big deal. It's just not going to satiate you. Here's what it will do, though. Now, I don't really care about the satiety index, but the glycemic index is something that's very important. The reason it is important is because it deals with blood sugar. The reason blood sugar is important is because you don't want diabetes, you don't want to lose your foot. I know too many people at risk. It's a real thing. Obviously, it's one of the things in fitness and dieting that the doctors do actually get behind. So it's always nice when the trainers and the doctors can kind of work together on something, or actually believe in the same thing. And so with the glycemic index, the refined carbohydrates, the sugary things, the white bread, they're low in fiber. So when they're low in fiber, they're digested, they're absorbed quickly. And what that does, it leads to a rapid spike in your blood sugar. And those are things that are high on the glycemic index. That's how, if it's higher, that it's the quicker it'll raise your blood sugar. Now, when you spike your blood sugar, if it goes up fast, it tends to lead to going down fast. That's the crash. It's a crash in blood sugar. That's when you get lightheaded, nauseous. It'll happen a few hours later, and then when that happens, you're just going to crave those refined carbs once again. It's this vicious cycle. Whereas if you eat something low on the glycemic index, it raises your blood sugar slowly. And then it will, as it raises it slowly, it'll gradually increase your insulin levels. Now, the reason that's good is because too many insulin spikes will cause your body to become more insulin resistant. And that's when your body stops responding to the insulin it's producing. So the extreme case is type 2 diabetics, right? But even normal people can have this. So when anyone says, yeah, carbs just really sit on me, or I'm insulin resistant, I can't eat carbs, it's not that you can't eat carbs. It's that you need to eat the right carbs. You need to stop eating the processed carbs, right? Like the white bread, the sugars, all that kind of stuff. Because when you eat those high glycemic foods, your blood sugar goes up, insulin rises too quickly, and it causes the insulin to also overproduce. And when the insulin overproduces, then you have fat storage, right? And none of that's good. There's not that many skinny type 2 diabetics. So all this bad stuff. So what you really need to focus on is the low glycemic foods, like whole grain stuff, right? Wheat bread, fruits, beans, nuts, things like that. Things that are natural. Oats are great, all that kind of stuff. And what you want to avoid is the obvious, right? The sugars, the candy, the scones, croissants, just the bad stuff, the very processed things. You really need to substitute them with low glycemic foods, things that haven't been processed as much. And this isn't, some argument, some organic, grass-fed granola argument people will roll their eyes about, but it's real. I mean, we all know sugar's bad. Half this podcast we've been talking about sugar. And the glycemic index does a really good job. I don't know if you've ever looked at one. It does a good job of mapping out exactly where everything is, almost ranking it, right? You got the very top, you got the exact opposite. It's just something to really pay attention to. And what it tends to do is really focus on, high carbohydrate foods. Which kind of leads to another point, is if your diet is low in carbs already, then you don't have to worry much about that. And it's already going to lead to weight loss anyway. Reason being, the only reason low carb diets really work well is because you're eating more protein. And the more protein you eat, we already talked about your body increasing its metabolic responsibility, its effort, how much it burns, yada yada. So that's the basic part of that. Anybody talks about a low carb diet, that's the only reason. It's not that they're actually going low carb. It's that what they're eating instead of the low carb is making their body work overtime. And with that also, they lose a lot of water weight comes off when you drop the carbs. A lot of bloating goes down. So you lose a little, it's not fake weight. You really are losing it. It's not there anymore, but it's not complete fat loss either. But that's about it. It really all comes down to having a higher protein diet, because 2,000 calories of protein is not 2,000 calories to your body, whereas 2,000 calories of carbs and fats is much more truer to 2,000 calories. So we'll circle back to the conversation I had yesterday with a client of mine. Of course, 1,500 calories of Doritos is not as good as 1,500 calories of fruits, vegetables, meats, oats, yogurts, whatever you can come up with. But it still all comes down to a calorie deficit in the end. Picking the foods is very important, but even if you pick all the right foods, you eat too much of them. Guys, thanks for checking out Quick Sessions Podcast. I had a new microphone today, so I hope it sounded a little bit better. That being said, I'm in a room that has no soundproofing at all, so I might have not given this new microphone its due as far as the debut is concerned. Guys, if you can, check out the website, quicksessionspodcast.com. You can also check us out on Facebook and Instagram. And if you got a minute, please hit the Apple Pod Center. Give us a rating and a review. You can also find us on Spotify and Google Play. Appreciate you listening. See y'all next time.